Pittsburgh Penguins got a weekend split against the Rangers and the Flyers, even though they played their butts off in both games. And Pat and I are going to recap both of those games for you all, plus discuss a very fascinating waiver wire edition right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on all social media platforms at Syndrome for Wet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So Penguins go 1-1 in this weekend back-to-back. Now they are on their 2-week break as the Four Nations face-off is getting underway this week. Team Canada just put out their lines. Sidney Crosby's out there for the skate, and he is skating with his best friend, Nathan MacKinnon, and Mark Stone. So good news that Crosby is out on the ice for practice and that it looks like his injury is, again, not too serious, but he didn't play in both games this weekend. Makes sense. He wants to be healthy for Team Canada just because being the captain of that squad really means a lot to him, especially at the late stages of his career. But starting this weekend with the game against the Rangers, this is the biggest takeaway I had from this game, and I said it on Twitter. The guts that they showed to win that game were phenomenal. I thought the Penguins badly outplayed the Rangers in the first period. Even though they were down heading into the second, I was kind of like, I'm not really seeing much from the Rangers here. The Rangers got a really lucky break in that first period thanks to a brutal turnover from Erik Karlsson. Karlsson just needs to go up the boards there. Pat, you and I were texting about that. No reason to send that puck to the middle of the ice. Vince Trocheck's waiting right there. Makes it 1-0. But the Penguins carried play throughout that first period. Igor Shesterkin was the main difference. He's that good of a goaltender. And then that play carried into the second period. The Penguins were able to tie the game at 1 early on in the period. Adam Fox makes it 2-1, even though there was really no one around him. And then 2-2. Then boom, Philip Tomasino gets the game winner, makes it 3-2. By the way, Blake Lizotte, really great game from him to able to tie that game. And then Rickard Rakell, what a shift that he had to tie the game at 2 before Tomasino broke the tie for good and made it 3-2. That was awesome. And the Penguins, they kept coming after making it 3-2. Igor Shesterkin had to come up with some really good saves to end that second period. And while the Penguins didn't play that well in the third period, they still defended hard. Like, that was the thing. Yeah, they hardly got any time in the offensive zone, but they still defended hard and were keeping the Rangers to the outside. I was texting you this during the game. Yes, the Rangers were getting a lot of offensive zone time, but how much of that time actually resulted in quality scoring chances? Not many. The Rangers only had 3 at 5-on-5, 3 high danger chances, that is, at 5-on-5 during that third period. When there was a timely save to be made, Alex Nedeljkovic was there to make it. By the way, shout out to him. Since January 17th, he's been at .926 or better in 6 of 8 starts. This is the best hockey we've seen him play this season. At the very least, he's boosting that trade value before the deadline, but he is playing phenomenal hockey right now. But again, man, the guts that they showed to win that game were awesome. We both know they're not making the playoffs this year, but if you didn't enjoy that win, I don't know if this sport's for you.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be happy, not just with the win, but with the effort, because that was a game where they were primed and ready to get their doors blown off against a New York Rangers team that, while they still very much have their warts and issues, they appear like they've really gotten a jolt from getting JT Miller back into their lineup and on their roster. And they're a team that does have aspirations of not only making the playoffs, but making a run. And again, I say that, yeah, they still have their issues and they still have their problems, but they're a pretty good hockey team, at least on paper, and they should be making their way back into the postseason picture here once we return from the Four Nations face-off break. And the Penguins kind of went into Madison Square Garden and asserted their will against the New York Rangers. And I don't know if that says more about the Penguins or the Rangers, but at the end of the day, you look at all of the players who were not available for the Penguins in both Sid and Gino, and then the next night against Philadelphia, Brian Rust goes out. This team played like they're a team that wants to make the playoffs, even though we know they won't. And it would be very easy, especially with all of the injuries, where this team is in the standings, a 2-week break on the horizon, and the majority of the roster is not going to this tournament. It would have been very easy for them to take these 2 games off and just say, this season's going nowhere fast. All of our key contributors are hurt. Our leadership group is out, and we just want to get done with this portion of the schedule and call it a day. They did the exact opposite. They played a hard-nosed, honest game. And you're right about the third period. If you just look at the stats for the third period, you would think that the Penguins completely took their foot off the gas. They went into a shell, and they really didn't. I mean, yeah, I would have liked to have seen them get a little bit more push and maybe at least a shot on net. But you look at the way they defended, it wasn't in a shell. They were taking the fight to the Rangers and keeping them to the outside, forcing them to make bad decisions and forcing them to take low percentage shots. Like, you look at that, the shot numbers, and yeah, the Rangers got 7 shots to the Penguins 0 in the third period. I can't really remember any of those 7 shots really being threatening. So the Penguins, yeah, they were in their own end for the majority of the third period, but the Rangers didn't really take advantage of anything because of how well the Penguins were defending. And of course, like you said, Nedeljkovic, when he needed to, came up huge.
100%. And yeah, the one main chance I felt like was the Trocheck one at the end of the third, where he almost scored, really nice save by Ned, and then Panarin, I think, shot one wide a few seconds later. That was during the 6-on-4, 6-on-5, which, by the way, that penalty at the end of the third period, textbook reffing to the score. Once again, that was a very weak call, but hey, you come to expect it when you think of NHL refs and their officiating. But just the way the Penguins were able to take it to the Rangers in that first 40 minutes, especially with how shorthanded they were, it was surprising. I got to admit, like, with the way the Rangers had been playing lately, it was a bit better compared to before. They had come back 2 games in a row from third period deficits. So I was in the back of my head, I'm kind of like, okay, there's at least a decent chance they might do the same thing here, because Penguins, I don't know if they'll be able to sustain that level of play. And while they didn't, they still were able to defend very well in the third, keep the Rangers to the outside, again, only allow 3 high danger chances at 5-on-5 during that period. And they were forcing the Rangers to really try and forecheck below the dots, which they're not that good at. A lot of the Rangers offense, once again, comes from off the rush opportunities. It comes via transition. And the Penguins, they weren't allowing any of those chances during the third period. They were very diligent with their pinches. They were bringing players back to the red line. Everyone was in position, especially when the Rangers were coming into the offensive zone shift after shift, and they weren't allowing a lot of those grade A opportunities. That was a difference in this game, along with more timely saves from Alex Nedeljkovic. Again, once again, Pat, really great performance from him. I can't say enough about the level that he's playing at right now. Just to take that stat a step further, in 7 of 8 starts since January 17th, almost a full calendar month, he's been at .905 or better. Really nice bounce back for the last 3.5 weeks after having such a rough first half of the season.
Yeah, that was a huge bounce back for Alex Nedeljkovic. And the other thing that we do have to acknowledge from that game is the penalty kill. Yeah, the Rangers only had 2 opportunities in that game, but if you look at the way they played at 5-on-4 with a man down, they continued that trend of defending very hard against the Rangers in this game. They got a couple of looks, but again, they didn't really allow too much sustained pressure by the Rangers. They didn't give them many quality opportunities along those 2 penalty kills. And it just fits right into that trend from this game where the Penguins played a very honest game. I keep coming back to that. I will never accuse a team that is coached by Mike Sullivan and captained by Sidney Crosby, whether or not Sidney Crosby's in the lineup or not, of playing kind of showman hockey. They never really do that, but you can see there are games over these past, I'm literally going to say 20 years, where the Penguins would get frustrated. They would look at their roster and think, we have all this talent. Why are we not winning 5-0 right off the rip? And then they start to cheat. They start to focus more on offense. But the Penguins against the Rangers, it was a full 200-foot effort, all three zones, doing the little things right, being in position where they need to be, and really smothering the Rangers' attack for the majority of the game. And again, I don't foresee this becoming the start of some long run that the Penguins go on and resurrect their season as they get healthier and bring a couple people up from Wilkes-Barre after the trade deadline. But you can see the makings of guys either doing one of two things. They're either boosting their trade value and looking like they're trying to send a message to Kyle Dubas of, hey, I want to go be part of a contender that goes on a run this spring. So can you get me some value and get me to one of those teams? Or these guys are saying, I am a Pittsburgh Penguin, and when this team starts to turn a corner in a year or two, I want to be part of the solution. So very encouraging victory by the Penguins on Saturday night. And we'll talk about it in the second segment, but a lot of the same things carried over to Saturday night in Philadelphia.
Right. And to your last point, someone that could really still be here the next couple of years, Philip Tomasino gets the game winner. Really beautiful one-timer, man, especially on the power play there. Great job by that unit. And you also touched on the little things here. Just 2 more points to make before we head to recap that game against the Flyers. Blocking shots. I thought the Penguins did an outstanding job getting into shooting lanes. That might have been the best game I've seen Noah Chari play in over a month. I felt like he was all over the puck, played really well in his own zone, blocked a lot of shots. Same thing with P.O. Joseph. I thought P.O. Joseph played a really strong game in all 3 zones in this one. He struggled a little bit this year. I feel like he's been better in most of the games compared to not, at least in my opinion. But I especially felt that way in this one. Blocking a lot of shots, playing well in his own zone, good on one-on-one opportunities. I felt he played well. And then last point I want to make is mainly about the Rangers, man. How, if you are the Rangers front office, how are you watching that game and thinking, man, I got to add to this team at the deadline? Like that team, I'm sorry, they're not very good. I don't think they do much of anything well except get timely saves from their number one goaltender. It feels like I've been watching the Rangers on repeat for the last 20 years. Oh, we have an elite goalie. Let's only pay him, but not worry about anything else. We did that with Lundqvist. Let's do the same thing here with Igor Shesterkin. Not worry about anything else. They just haven't decided to change up that strategy at all. So again, just very weird stuff from the Rangers. But hey, Penguins will gladly take that win. And again, man, I just loved the effort. I loved the guts I saw for the Penguins in this one. But that'll do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, Pat and I are going to recap that loss against the Flyers, even though the Penguins badly outplayed the Flyers in that game, especially given the circumstances they had with road travel, and it's a back-to-back. But before we get to that, Pat and I have to tell you all about our first sponsor, and that is FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is very easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dampin. Yes, we were supposed to have Jesse Marshall on from The Athletic for another Marshall Monday today, but right before we were about to record, he texts us, yeah, he's in some meetings for the next hour. So you know what, Jesse? Shame on you for doing your job and not coming on the show for 10 to 15 minutes on this Monday. Now, we're just messing. Hopefully, we'll have him on next Monday. But we will say Josh Yohe of The Athletic is coming on the show on Tuesday to discuss all things Penguins, trade deadline, probably a little bit of Four Nations face-off talk, and just, again, everything relating to this team. So stay tuned for that coming for you all on Tuesday. It'll be normal time for everyone. But getting back to the meat of the second segment, Pat. Penguins lose to the Philadelphia Flyers on Saturday night, 3-2 in a game that I thought the Penguins deserved a better fate. I thought they played very well in this game. Yeah, the Flyers took that early lead in the first period, kind of a bad defensive breakdown from the Penguins, but they still dominated that first period. I mean, you look at the numbers, Pat, 34 shot attempts to only 3 for the Flyers, 15 scoring chances for, 1 scoring chance against. They ended that game with 40 scoring chances at 5-on-5. And you don't even have to look at the numbers to see that the Penguins dominated that game. They were all over the Flyers in the offensive zone. Sam Ersson just had a great game, people. Sometimes that's the difference, even though he's had a really rotten year this year for the Flyers, even though the Flyers goaltending has been bad overall with either of their 3 goalies. Sam Ersson still put together a really sound performance and net, made a lot of really big timely saves. Did get a little bit of help from the Penguins because a couple players missed some wide open opportunities, including Danton Heinen. How do you sky that one, man? 5 feet out, you got to put that one in the back of the net. That's got to be in there. But still,
I will say about that Danton Heinen chance, I think Ersson, I said it, I texted it to you during the game. I think Ersson got a piece of it. And I went back and watched that replay, and it was definitely a desperation save by Ersson. And yeah, we can definitely criticize Heinen for not putting it in, but I got to at least tip my hat on that one because he just sprawled out and put his arm in the exact right spot to get a piece of it. Because that thing was ticketed for the middle of the net when I went back and watched it, and he somehow got a piece of it. So as much as I want to clown Heinen for missing that, I can't in good faith not acknowledge what was an awesome desperation save.
I hear you. I want him to put that puck in the back of the net. Wide open opportunity. Score on that chance, Dan, please. But going back to other parts about the game with the Penguins and the Flyers, 17 high danger chances for, 6 high danger chances against. The first goal I already discussed, bad defensive breakdown, but the goal that tied it, thanks to Erik Karlsson, what a play that was, Pat. The way that he was able to fit that puck in the smallest of margins in the net was awesome. Sam Ersson was basically covering the entire net. And I say basically because there's a smidge of room upstairs. Karlsson finds it, and his shot continues to be so underutilized for how good it is. I want him to use that release more because it's so good. He just doesn't use it enough, Pat. Like, that's the thing. We all know how good he is as a playmaker. We've seen it throughout the season. We've seen it last season. Has it been as good as he was with the Sharks? No, but I still want to see him shoot the puck a bit more. And you saw why with that one. And then the goal that made it 2-1. Pat, when you're a goaltender, what are you supposed to do?
Tend the goal.
You can tell that Joel Blomqvist had not played in 2 weeks because he was a bit shaky coming out of the net there. He was kind of like, should I do it? No. Should I do it? No. Should I do it? No. He's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to full send it. Comes out, just banks the puck off guard at Hathaway, goes in. Hathaway's just laughing after that. It's like, if you're going to make a play on it, commit to it. Don't just, excuse my language, don't half-ass it. And I think that's kind of what he did on that play. And you could tell even after that play, he looked really rusty with the start. But hey, that's what happens when Alex Nedeljkovic gets quite a few starts these last few weeks.
Yeah, you could definitely see that there was some rust for Joel Blomqvist in this game. He definitely looked like a cold goaltender who, like you said, had 2 weeks off basically. So that's a tough position for him to be in. And all I could think of when Garnet Hathaway gets that goal is all it made me think of was if you've ever played EASHL on NHL and you have someone on your team or the opposing team manually controlling the goalie, because that was just an absolutely absurd decision. And again, putting the joke of it aside, you're right. If you're going to do that, if you're going to leave the net in that instance to stop a breakaway and keep them from getting possession with a clean look on the net, you've got to commit 100% to it. And he kind of hesitated. And that hesitation made all the difference because he kind of meets Hathaway right at the puck. And that is the exact risk that you run in that moment when you do that. Because if it becomes a 50-50 puck, you either are able to clear it out and your defenseman can help you, or what happens is what happened, where it deflects off the guy you're going up against, it goes behind you and either goes in the net, or that guy just gets a look at a completely void cage. And it was just, again, it was a rusty play. It was a rusty game for Blomqvist. And you go back and watch that game. I did yesterday morning. I watched a lot of the highlights, and the Penguins were head and shoulders the better team for the entire game. They outplayed the Flyers in all three zones. They brought the attack to them. You even pop, like I like to say, pop the hood and look at the advanced analytics. The Penguins had 65% of the shot attempts at 5-on-5. They dominated this game, and just one blunder from Joel Blomqvist ends up becoming the difference. And it's funny because you look at this season and how many times have we said the reason they lost was goaltending. And in this instance, by literal definition, yeah, they lost because of goaltending, because Blomqvist made a curious decision that ended up in the back of the net. But even then, it wasn't like they dominated and lost because Blomqvist was bad. It was because he made one bad decision in the absolute worst moment.
100%. And the Flyers make it 3-1 right after. Then the Penguins, in a very weird, awkward sequence, make it 3-2. The refs originally rule no goal because it looked like it was the intent to blow call. And then all of a sudden they're reviewing the play. And I was texting you this. I'm like, are you allowed to challenge intent to blow? Because I don't think you are. I've never seen that before. But then the NHL actually clarified it after the game, saying that the referee's initial call on the ice was no goal due to goaltender interference. It did not seem like that at all. They didn't even announce that it was goaltender interference when they originally said no goal. And they said after video review, it was determined no goaltender interference infractions occurred. I mean, we knew that. It didn't look like there was any goalie interference there to begin with, but it felt like that was not what happened at all. It felt like to me that they were trying to challenge intent to blow, which again, I don't think is a challengeable play. I've never seen that happen before, but if the NHL says it was for goaltender interference, I guess I'm going to go along with it, even though, again, Pat, didn't feel like it was for actually goaltender interference.
I mean, if there's one thing that I know that it's uniform across all sports, people love to complain about officiating because it's the lowest hanging fruit. But as Jeff Merrick likes to say, low hanging fruit is still fruit. But at the end of the day, if there's one thing that the NFL gets right when it comes to stuff like this, is they will have the official tell you in agonizing detail what happened. They will come out and say, we are reviewing this. After reviewing this, this is what we saw, and this is why this is the call. The NHL has to take a page out of that. That's not even getting into saying that the NHL needs to take a page from the NBA and do a 2-minute report or anything like that. But the fact that everybody, including the broadcasts, thought that they were going off of the intent to blow call and not goaltender interference. And then they just come out and say, after review, the call has been reversed. We have a goal. You need to say the Penguins have challenged the call on the ice, which is goaltender interference for no goal. We are going to video review, and then come out and say, after review, we have determined that there was no goaltender interference on the play. Therefore, we have a good goal on the ice. So at the end of the day, they just need to describe it better, because here's the thing. They got the call right. They didn't get it wrong here. They got the right call. They used video review and the challenge system to get the correct call. And that is the goal of what you want to do with this system. But if you don't come out and explain it, everybody is confused. And yeah, they don't owe us explanations, but if you're going to have this system in place, you need to describe what is going on, not just, hey, we reviewed the video, it's a goal, deal with it. And because if the Penguins were on the other end of this, I would be furious, just like Flyers fans are. And they're right to be furious because there was no explanation. It was the correct call, but in real time, they did not explain what happened.
It was the right call, but the way they went about it was, I think, the wrong thing to do, in my opinion. But just to wrap up this game, I loved the 6-on-5 at the end, considering how short-handed the Penguins were. No Crosby, no Malkin, no Brian Rust. They still got plenty of really quality chances with that second unit, in quotation marks, with the 6-on-5. They loaded up Letang and Carlson at the points. They had Rickard Rakell out there, as well as, Philip Tomasino and a bunch of others. And they still put together a really strong push. Kevin Hayes was out there for quite a bit of time as well. And Sam Ersson had to make a couple of really big saves to end that game to not let the Penguins get a point in that game and send that game to overtime. And even when they lost, I was like, you know what? I will still gladly take that effort all game long, considering the circumstances, road travel, back to back, the way they outplayed the Flyers in that one. I was pretty happy. I wouldn't say, obviously, I'm never happy to lose a game, but the way they lost, and even though I know they're not really going anywhere this season, I will still take that because they fought till the end. They played really well in both games this weekend. I am very happy with the guts they showed, the effort they showed, the heart they displayed, and all that good stuff as well. But do you have anything else to add before
Friday night was a night where they had at least a minimal excuse to say, hey, we're going to throw in the towel and just we're playing a team that's better than us. We're missing Sid and Gino. The Four Nations face-off break is right around the corner. Saturday night, you can double that because you find out in the afternoon that Brian Rust is hurt and he's not playing. And he has been one of the most consistent and best players on the Penguins roster for the last 2 years. But they still go out and play one hell of a game against the Flyers. And as we've talked about, one silly mistake makes the difference. But the effort they put out there, it fits right into that narrative of what you and I have been saying about where this team is. We understand that this is an undermanned, undergunned roster because of where this franchise is at the current moment and what they're trying to do. But just as long as you're not getting embarrassed, I can live with a loss. I can live with this loss because you played really well. One mistake makes the difference, but you went out and played a full 60 and absolutely took it to a team, and one bad bounce makes the difference. That's hockey, man. Sometimes you have games like this, and if they can replicate that effort down the stretch and the rest of the way, and it doesn't lead to wins, but you're seeing progress from some of the younger guys, you're seeing the key contributors still continue to be themselves, it gives you an ever so slight glimmer of hope going into the next couple of years that maybe this is the right plan and maybe they are on the right track.
Hey, speaking of a fun player, that's exactly what Kyle Dubas added via waivers on Sunday. The Penguins got a young defenseman that has a chance to play right away and has some really strong underlying numbers. Pat and I are going to dive into that player coming up here to end the show. But before we get to that, we have to tell you all about our final sponsor, and that is Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Well, that's easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. So, Pat, Kyle Dubas was a bit busy during Super Bowl Sunday yesterday, adding defenseman Vladislav Kolyachonok to the Penguins via waivers after he was placed on waivers by the Utah Hockey Club. And admittedly, people, I did not know much about him after he was added. I looked into the numbers, I watched a little bit of tape, and I really like this addition. He has the chance to play right away and potentially some even bigger minutes once the Penguins trade Matt Grzelcyk. And I would not be surprised if he gets traded during the Four Nations face-off break. 2 weeks off. I think you might see some teams, considering how many players are not going to this event, Pat, I would not be surprised if you still see some GMs be pretty aggressive during this 2-week break and try to get some trades done, especially with the deadline coming up in about a month now. And again, I would not be surprised if Matt Grzelcyk gets traded here coming out of the break. But with Kolyachonok, there's a lot of intrigue here. I really dove into the film a bit late last night. I did a little bit more this morning. Skates like the wind. He is a very fluid skater, especially with a puck on his stick, really responsible in his own zone. His shot is also a lot of fun. That thing blasts off his stick. Again, a little bit of a small sample size. I mean, he's only played this year 23 games. His most games played during a season was 32 with the Arizona Coyotes, which of course are now in Utah. That came during the 21-22 season. But again, really like his shot. I really like his skating ability. There was one goal that I even retweeted for everyone on Twitter on Sunday that showed him have quite a great move earlier this season when he went forehand, backhand on a little bit of a mini breakaway to score a goal. And you look at the underlying numbers for this player this year. And when he's been on the ice, 277 minutes for Utah, 23 games. When he's been on the ice, Utah has 53% of the shot attempts. They also have 56% of the scoring chances, about 62% of the high danger chances. So he helps drive offense when he is on the ice. He's only in his early 20s. This is the exact type of player that you should be adding to your lineup, considering that you want to get younger. See what you have in him. It's always good to take flyers on players like this, and especially with how weak this defensive group has been for a lot of this season, and you're probably going to be losing Matt Grzelcyk soon. Easy slam dunk addition here. I'm excited to see what they have in this kid.
It's no risk, all reward. He's signed through next season. It's less than $1 million. He's 23 years old, and for being 23, he's 6'2", 195, and like you said, he can skate. Watching some of the footage of him this morning, he is, I don't want to say he's a burner because he's not obscenely fast, but he is a very fluid skater. It is very effortless. In 2-3 strides, he's gone. And looking at his shot, I mean, what did we talk about in the last segment about Erik Karlsson? And I'm not comparing the kid to Erik Karlsson, but Erik Karlsson has a really underutilized shot. So does this kid. This kid, when he has an opportunity, he can fire the thing. And at the very least, as you said, 23 years old, less than $1 million. You know what this organization is trying to do right now. They're trying to stockpile as much young talent as they can. And part of that process is finding players like this, who Utah has a lot of really young players. Utah has a logjam of young players because for as much of a tire fire as the Arizona Coyotes were before they moved, they actually were doing a fairly good job stockpiling draft picks and younger players in salary cap space, and not the salary cap space where they just take on dead money. They were actually doing a good job of building a young core with a lot of talent, but that means that there are always going to be odd men out. There are always going to be talented players who, for some reason, can't break through in an organization that's chock full of them. So if you're Kyle Dubas, when you see a player like this hit the waiver wire or hit the trade block, you have to be interested in it because, again, with where the Penguins are and what they're trying to do, unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon how you view it, they have to go pretty much quantity over quality because they don't have a lot in their system that's homegrown. So if you can get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or more young players, they might not be your franchise cornerstones, but if 2, 3, or 4 of them can become legitimate NHL contributors, and with this kid, he's shown he can play at an NHL level. So maybe he becomes a contributor for this team in the future, or at the very least, you have a serviceable player that sometime in the next 12 to 16 months, you can move for more assets. So I would say next to no risk, all reward for the Penguins with this move.
Yeah, there's no risk at all with this. If he doesn't pan out, you just put him back on waivers. It really doesn't matter. You just want to see what you have in this player. And if he does pan out, that's good because you obviously have another option, potentially long-term, in Owen Pickering. He showed quite a bit at the NHL level earlier this season. If both he and Kolyachonok pan out, that's 2 options on your left side for quite a bit. And then you have Harrison Brunet coming potentially next season that you might have. Again, this is best case scenario, people, but you might have half of your decor, fairly young, by the way, potentially set for a little bit. But again, I just want to see how Kolyachonok plays coming out of the break. He's going to get opportunities. I had a couple people come on my mentions yesterday. Well, he's not going to get the opportunities, blah, 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 blah. It's like, he is going to play. Matt Grzelcyk is going to get traded. They really have no other choice. Like, are you going to play Ryan Shea over him? No, there's no need to. Like, your left side, once Grzelcyk gets dealt, it's going to be something of P.O. Joseph, Ryan Graves, and Kolyachonok. Like, you're not going to play Ryan Shea in that situation. Then your right side, you're going to have Vinny Desharnais, Erik Karlsson, because I don't think he's going to get dealt at the deadline at least, and then Chris Letang. Like, you have to see what you have in this kid. And oh, by the way, he ranks 8th out of 205 defensemen in expected goals for percentage this year. Really strong underlying numbers, even though it's a little bit of a small sample, but still, the early returns, pretty fascinating for a player like this. I'm excited to see what the Penguins have in him once they come out of the break. One more thought, though, before we end today's episode. Going back to the 2 games this weekend, I had something, it came out of my mind, and it came back right at the end of the show. Rickard Rakell, man, 25 goals, outstanding play in that Rangers game. I only trade him if you get the sun and the moon. I will continue to say that on this show. If you can get a first and a good prospect, I would very much consider it. But I am not dealing him unless you get a pretty big haul. I am more than comfortable keeping him until the summer. Yes, I understand his value might not be higher right now, but I am only dealing him if you can get a monstrous package back. That's just my opinion, though.
I'm right there with you, and I also want to put this caveat onto it as well. I think, again, if you get an offer, if you get a Godfather offer you can't refuse kind of offering for Rickard Rakell at the deadline, it would be malpractice on Kyle Dubas's part to not take it. But it's setting up for them to get an even bigger haul in the offseason for him, because between a rising salary cap, a lot of teams who need to go for it next year, and a lot of a really good pending free agent class on July 1, you mix all that together, it is going to cost teams a lot of money to get players like this on their roster. And that's an opportunity to Kyle Dubas to say, hey, I got this guy who just had a huge year and he's only signed at $5 million for the next 3 years. Do you want to take a shot on him? Or do you want to go get one of those free agents who might cost you 7, 8, or 9, or even more $1 million? So if you just want to pay some assets rather than burn a bunch of cap space, I'm your go-to guy. So I think it actually would behoove them to hold on to him pending an offer you can't refuse at the deadline, because this summer you can get a king's ransom for him.
Right. And again, man, the first is the bare minimum for me, but I want something a bit extra, good prospect, or at least a decent roster player coming back for Rakell, in my opinion. But that will do it for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Remember, everyone, Josh Yohe of The Athletic is joining the show on Tuesday to discuss all things Penguins, how they played the season so far, what do you expect to the deadline, maybe some Four Nations face-off talk, all that, plus so much more coming your way on Tuesday. So for Patrick Damp, I am Hunter Hodes. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one, and we'll be back on Tuesday.